Hey, dudes and dudettes. It's me, your Uncle Herbie, and this is another episode of Wisdom After the Fall. Today, we're going to talk about IQ, intelligence, voting, our culture, and why we're in the trouble we're in, which is a big subject for the few minutes this is going to take, but I think you'll get to my point right away. The mean IQ of the United States is 100. Now, let me be clear what I mean by mean. That's not the average IQ. Averages can be deeply affected by extremes at one end or the other. So you could say the average IQ in the United States is about 107, which I think is what it is, but that's not the mean. The mean is where the population breaks in half. So half the population has a lower IQ than 100, and half the population has a higher IQ than 100. And 100 is just a little bit above. I don't know any other word. I guess I could use learning disabled or something, but retarded. Okay. When you get, down to 90 and 80, you're really, you're at the bottom. Muhammad Ali's IQ was estimated to be about 70. And he used to, the cute rhymes and everything were to cover up the fact that he was not particularly bright. I'm not saying this to denigrate Muhammad Ali. I'm just pointing out that you can be very, very effective while being very, very dumb. But you wouldn't want to take political advice. And our founders were acutely aware of this. By the way, to get to 100 mean, how does the number such perfectly? Why is the mean a perfect 100? Because the IQ tests are manipulated so that it's always 100. Okay, they manipulate the questions and make the test, as of the last few decades, easier and easier and easier, so as to keep depicting the population as at least being half intelligent. But the fact is, if we gave IQ tests the way they gave them, let's say when I was a child, the mean IQ in this country might be closer to 90 or even 80. Now, I bring this out because these people are voting, and this is deeply affecting our population. We're all worried about this issue and that issue, and this is not a political podcast, so I'm not going to get into what's your favorite issue and why you think this person should be this or we should do that or whatever program at this point. I'll talk about individual issues. I have and I will, but I won't talk about political parties and who you should vote for. You do that. That's your business. There's plenty of talking heads who are shills for both major parties. What I'm talking about are people that shouldn't be voting. The founders knew that there were a lot of stupid people. Now, they didn't have IQ tests, but, like Forrest Gump said, stupid is as stupid does. So what did they use? Their common sense, and they could look around them and see there were a lot of stupid people. And they also had their powers of observation and believed their eyes, which today somehow we don't want to believe our lying eyes, I guess, on so many things, but I digress. And so they could see that the dumber the person, the less likely it was they were going to own property or be productive in the society. So what they did is they set up a voting requirement of owning property and also being male. I'm not going to get into that at all. Of course, women should be allowed to vote. However, stupid women and stupid men should not be allowed to vote. And the founders knew that because stupid is as stupid does, and stupid people vote for stupid things. And when you manipulate the IQ scores and you realize that half our population is really almost just a stage above retarded, you have to ask yourself why we keep encouraging people to vote and why we did away with some kind of barrier to entry. Okay, now we can't go back and we're not going to reinstate a property requirement. I'm not naive and I'm not stupid, but I want to talk about how many issues that have come into play and have wild popular support that are just bizarre. But the fact of the matter is, more than half the population supports it, and they're dumber than dirt. The explanation, it's Occam's razor. The simplest explanation and the true explanation are usually the same thing. We can get into all kinds of subtext on, it was, and I've said this before, AFDC, welfare broke the nuclear family. And, we've compounded that through a history of social programs, which have only created a permanent underclass of dependency and has created a toxic urban black environment in particular, and has caused all kinds of criminal problems. And the list goes on and on, but maybe it all boils down to this. We decided to let the stupid people vote. We are letting the stupid people vote. Now, back in Athens, okay, and look, I could sugarcoat this and pretend there aren't such things as stupid people, but they're not watching this podcast. Stupid people would be already too bored to watch this podcast and would be too probably triggered because they've been told to be triggered, not because they have any rational or thinking reason to be triggered, but they've been trained that way because stupid people are easily influenced and trained. And the fact of the simple matter is that they're out there, just in dumb land, and they're not going to watch this because there's nothing entertaining going on and I'm not posting cute little colorful graphics. So, like I'm not worried about insulting them. So I'm just talking between you and I, who are, whether you're right, left, or down the center, whether you're male or female, or whatever race or age you are. I'm just assuming you're above average, above the mean, because you wouldn't be watching this kind of podcast if you weren't. So let's just be honest with each other. Why did we ever let the stupid people vote? Now, when you go, it goes all the way back to Athens, or the original Greek democracy was a democracy by lottery. They didn't have elections because they knew enough that the minute you have elections, you introduce ambition. And the minute you introduce ambition, you introduce manipulation. And you also introduce political careers. By the way, in Greece, it was a one and done. You got chosen by lot. You served for a period, I think it was 1 year and whatever the position was, and then you were done for life. You could never be reselected. You would never go back in. And I don't want to go too deep into that. However, by the way, yes, I do, just for 1 second. I wrote a book. It's called A Radical Reset. I did not really think to bring this up. I'm just going to tell you right now. It's called A Radical Reset. It's the manifesto of a system that I call anti-politism. And it is a return to democracy by lottery in a very modern way that would actually work and would get rid of all political careers, all money in politics, all political parties, and all the morons, all at once. Read it. It's $2.99 on Amazon by me, Herbie K. $2.99 to find out if I'm completely full of shit or maybe there's actually something going on here. The greatest ideas can sometimes start in the smallest places. So just saying, I realize I'm a little obscure podcast out here in Phoenix and, like a boomer and all the other things that you can denigrate, but and an ex-convict, for Christ's sake. But maybe, just maybe, there's something in here that you might want to read. For $2.99, it wouldn't kill you. So give it a read. Anyway. Why I made that sound? No idea. I don't script these shows. Also, while I'm thinking about it, like, subscribe, and share, and ring the bell, and all that other kind of good stuff. Okay, back on subject. So, in Athens, the lottery was done from an elite. It was from a ruling elite. And they carried that on in the Roman democracy before they ultimately descended into dictatorship. And the Roman Republic, when it was a democracy, was, it was an Athenian Republican democracy, like we were supposed to have. Again, an elite. From the wealthy families, the property families, came the people who ruled the city. And, when I say that, I know that the word elite takes on a lot of negative connotations in our culture, especially. Okay, elite, elitist, elitism. But the truth is we need to be governed by an elite. Let's just be honest with each other. Now, that elite is not the elite governing us now. The minute you introduce ambition into the equation, I don't care what your politics are, you begin to bastardize yourself. Ironic as this is going to sound, for years and years and years, back in Tucson, Arizona, where I lived before I completely shit the bed and committed a crime and went to prison and was completely guilty of it. And if you want to know what I did and how I did it and why I was guilty and all those other good things, episodes 1 and 2 of this podcast, the very original 2 episodes, lay it all out. I do not hide my past. But with all that experience, where was I going with this? Back in the day when I was an honest citizen and living a clean life and a family man and all those other kind of good things, at least on the surface, which is where everybody lives. Nobody knows what goes on behind closed doors, which would terrify all of us. And we don't need to go there. That's why those doors are closed. And we're not, and the price of opening them would be worse than what we're trying to solve. But I digress. So, I'm a big advocate for privacy. That's all I'm saying. Over the years, you're going to have to take my word for this. I'm a very good public speaker. In fact, I'm better than very good. Most people who have heard me speak, and this is without an ounce of humility, but, okay, obviously I'm flawed or I wouldn't be where I am. So let's not, overestimate me. But I'm just going to tell you, if you ever saw me speak publicly, you would say to yourself, that's the best public speaker I've ever seen. I was that good at it. And because of that, I was approached, particularly by Republicans, because I was in business, all the time to run for office. Local office, city office, Congress, Senate, governor. I've been talked to about all of them over the years. Turned it down every single time. Turned it down every single time because I have no lust for power. And I knew that if I decided that this is what I wanted to do, I was always interested in it and I always entertained it and I always held it as a fantasy. And I talked to my family about it and it wasn't a secret. But at the very same time, I chose to never do it. And I mean, I'm talking over a 30-year period. Just no, 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 no. I'm not going to do it. I didn't want to get my family exposed to it. I didn't want to expose my life to it. And I just don't have a lust for power so great that I want to put everyone, basically it was family. It was a family decision. I just didn't want to put everyone through it. And I didn't want to, in raising my children, here's what I learned about raising children. Small digression. I'll do a whole video on this one of these days, but they're really, 99% of being a great parent is showing up. Okay, I'm going to tell you that right now, guys. 99% of it. But strict, easy, spank them, don't spank them, left, right, center, Montessori schools, public schools, private schools, all the rest. You want your kids to turn out well, stay married and show up. That's it. That's the two secrets. Okay, mom and dad have to show up for everything. Everything. If you have girls, every girl thing. If you have boys, every boy thing. You have to be enthusiastic, you have to be involved, and you have to show up. That's it. That's parenting. Then you'll have great kids. All the rest of it is almost like side notes. So I didn't want to take away from that, and I didn't want to make that sacrifice. And the people that do make that sacrifice, by the way, I'm not uncommon. Most of us would never run for office for probably pretty identical reasons. Maybe you've been asked to run for office in the past, and you've said to yourself, Jesus Christ, why would I put my family through it? Plus, if you're like any successful person, you've done some things that are really shitty. Not illegal, just shitty. And you did them and you learned from them and you don't want to do it again. But we don't need to have a public discussion of it. We don't need to break it down. Okay? I mean, the classic example is what happened to poor Brett Kavanaugh when he was being confirmed for the Supreme Court. They went after him for an allegation by a woman who, when she knew him, was 17, couldn't identify where they were, couldn't pick them out of a crowd, but has just decided that this was the kid who got handsy with it. The accusation came down to not rape. She never accused him of trying to pull her clothes off or anything else. She accused him of being aggressive. Now, dudes, this is for the men watching this. Every man, at one point or another, if he's heterosexual, maybe if you're homosexual too, I just have no homosexual experience with this. I just don't think I think homosexuals have a lot of sex, a lot more than heterosexuals, because you have two men and they just basically want to screw constantly, where women are the ones who put the brake on it in heterosexual relationships, normally, in a classical relationship, I guess I should say. I mean, today, who the hell knows what the body counts? But anyway, where was I going with this? Back when we were 17 and 16 and dating girls, I'll bet you at least once got a little pushy and handsy, like had a hard time taking no for an answer. You took no, you didn't rape her in the end, you took her home, but you might have even gotten slapped. Does that label you a sex predator for life because an overactive hormone? Even if it were true, why was it being brought up when this man was 56 years old at the time of his confirmation? He was married with three beautiful daughters. He had a sterling reputation. Nothing else came out. This is what they dredged up. And this is why no person, left or right, wants to go through this. Okay? Nobody in their right mind wants to go through running for office. So what we get are sociopaths and psychopaths who take their lead from idiots. Because we have a democracy, okay, and we've now opened it to universal suffrage, and we stupidly not only encourage everybody to vote, but we've opened up the fraud gates with mail-in ballots. And look, I don't want to get into a discussion on whether Trump really won or lost in 2020, and I'm just not going to go there. I'm not even going to share my opinion of it. It's not what you think, okay? My opinion is not going to be what you think it is. I'm just going to tell you that mail-in ballots are insane. Okay, unless you're armed forces overseas or you're shut in a hospital. Other than that, or a nursing home. Other than that, and you qualify under the other guidelines that should be there for voting, you should not be allowed to be mail-in, and certainly not allowed third parties to collect them, as evidenced by the recent Los Angeles election of mayor, which was a clear fix. Now, it was a legal fix, and I know I might get comments written, that was legal, that was legal. Yeah, it was legal. You can make corruption legal. That's what our entire legal system has done. They've set up the entire system to make corruption legal, and they've done it under the auspices of helping us. And we believe that we, being the broad American population, because the mean IQ is 100 manipulated up, The real mean IQ is much lower, which means half the population is just barely above retarded. That's not to say they aren't good human beings. That's not to say they don't contribute to their communities. That's not to say they can't be happily married and raise wonderful children and become whatever it is. And by the way, I wouldn't even categorize it by career. I have met lawyers and engineers who are just fucking stupid. But they slip through the cracks. It's everywhere. It has nothing to do with who does what for a living. And one of my dearest friends is a retired plumber, and he's a genius. There's just no doubt about it. He just preferred working with his hands, and he'd like to see what he did at the end of the day, and he liked getting paid for it and going home and forgetting about it. So people are complicated. I'm not making any broad generalizations about anything. Not race, not career, not gender, nothing. I'm just saying that a lot of people are just plain stupid. And when you're just plain stupid, you shouldn't be voting, because you're basing your votes, these people, not you, I should stop saying it. These people are basing their votes, okay, on bullshit, because they can't tell shit from shinola. What is intelligence but the ability to discern and analyze and process and use objective facts? That's what intelligence really is. What makes a smart person smart is how fast they come up with solutions, and how creativity and everything else all go along with it. Okay, so people who are stupid are worthwhile humans and equal in the eyes of God, but they are not equal in ability, and they should not. And if they were in an honest world, if we had been honest with everybody to begin with, and we had never set up the expectation to begin with that everybody should be voting, and we had left the republic alone, it would have never been a problem. There were no non-voter riots in the 1900s and the 1800s, before property, no one was rioting and saying we should have the vote. This was just Woodrow Wilson trying to manipulate the system, the most evil and bad president in U.S. history by far. Not Donald Trump, not Barack Obama, not Jimmy Carter, not anybody in your lifetime, okay? Woodrow Wilson is the one who set up the giant butt fucking that we're getting right now. But that will also be another episode for another day. But one of a part of that was universal suffrage. And what a mistake. And that genie is out of the bottle. And as long as that genie is out of, when I wrote A Radical Reset, the book that I shared with you earlier, and about anti-politism, I have no illusions. Nothing like anti-politism will ever happen before a disaster. Okay, I wrote the book because I expect disaster to happen. We have stupided ourselves into a horrible corner. I've spoken in some past episodes on how we could convert everybody into being propertied and return the property requirement, privatize Social Security so everyone had a 401k, so everyone had property, so everyone had skin in the game. That's all great. It's not going to happen. That's just too smart a solution. And there are too many stupids. There are people out there that as soon as I bring that up will scream, I paid into it and I want my guarantee. Even though they'd be getting $9,500 a month if the system had been privatized all along instead of the average of $1,500 a month, it won't matter. Stupid is as stupid does. And they'll be manipulated by people like Bernie Sanders, who's a beautiful example of Bernie Sanders and Tucker Carlson are two sides of the same coin. I want to go right and left on this one, on manipulating the stupids. Okay, I mean, I could go on and on, but these people are not stupid, but they know who they're dealing with, and they're making a living on it. You ever wonder who the millions of people are who listen to Tucker Carlson? That's a sign that you're stupid. If you believe anything socialist, socialism doesn't stand up to any kind of critical thought. It just doesn't. Thomas Sowell famously said that you have to ask three questions whenever a government wants to do anything. The first question is, as compared to what? So when someone says we need to become socialist, well, as compared to what is almost 200 million dead people in the 20th century. How many more people does the system have to kill and not enrich anybody before they figure it out? Now, they have a very convenient explanation, which is blame it on the capitalists kept it down. If it weren't for the capitalists, never mind, they've never lived in a capitalist country their whole life. I know I'm ranting a little today, but don't you ever just get sick of it? Don't you ever just sit there and say to yourself, God almighty, the stupidity is so thick I can almost cut it with a knife. Don't you just sometimes want to remember that movie? What was that movie? Network. Don't you ever want to just stick your head out the window and say, I'm mad as hell and I'm not going to take it anymore? And I'll tell you exactly who's to blame for this. We are. We voted this idiocy in. We go along with this crap. The objective thinkers, and we're outnumbered and our birth rate is down. Okay, we're not having children. The stupids are breeding like bunny rabbits. and because the apples don't fall too far from the tree. When I say that, that's not any kind of a racist or pejorative comment. It's a statement of plain fact. The apple, yes, two stupids can miraculously give birth to a Mozart, but let's remember that the real Mozart, okay, had a father who was a very accomplished composer, a mother who was a very accomplished musician. His sister would have been as famous as he is if she wasn't a woman in those days. Fantastic musician. They were all, the apples fell right next to the tree. Okay, Mozarts that really don't pop out of, families of idiots. I'm sorry. I know everyone would like to believe that because that's another fairy tale we tell ourselves. But just because you tell yourself something, you can't manifest reality. Reality is what reality is. Okay, I'm done ranting and raving. I'm at the 20-minute mark, and that's about as far as I want to go. Anyway, how would I wrap this show up? I'd say stop paying too much attention because stupid will drive you crazy, and we are just up to our asses in stupid. There's going to be a crash, my friends. The day of reckoning is going to come. I don't know if it's going to come today or next week or next month or next year, because stupid can go on a long time. But a long time is, for us, we're comparing it to our lifetimes, and a long time historically is several, can be 100 years, right? And now we're about, we're getting close to it. We're just over a century of real stupidity since we completely tossed the Republic. And we're about to kick down the last vestige of it, which is the Electoral College. If that goes, just forget it. I mean, just forget it. Then it's going to come on really fast. The Electoral College was set up because the founders knew that most people were stupid. Okay, I just want you to understand that. It was set up to prevent, okay, the stupids from taking over, to intervene in case the stupids elected someone really stupid for president. They should have done their job when Woodrow Wilson was elected, but somehow people believed he was smart. He was a pseudo-intellectual, but that's another story for another day. Anyway, I would suggest basically disengaging. Most of my podcasts don't get into this sort of thing, and they won't. They'll get into more life issues and relating things to how your life really lives. And we'll talk about everything under the sun because wisdom encompasses everything, whether you think I'm wise or not. But then I invite conversation. If you feel motivated, by the way, there's a Patreon link and buy me a coffee link below. For a very small commitment, I will send you a free copy of A Radical Reset. And help me build the show. Right now, I mean, really, we have no subscribers, so I haven't built the community. But when I say no, we do, but a couple of dozen. When I get over 1,000 subscribers, which is when it begins to monetize on YouTube, I will then be able to build the community, because right now I'm a one-man show, and I just apologize for that, but you can tell by the way I edit this, which is to say I really don't. And, what you see is what you get. I'm hoping the quality of my words outpaces the shittiness of my video. What can I tell you? Anyway, have a beautiful day. It was fun talking to you. And until next time, this is your Uncle Herbie. Peace out.